Budget desktop speakers usually follow the same pattern. They either focus too much on RGB and forget the sound, or they push loud treble that feels exciting for 10 minutes and tiring after an hour. That is why the Nylavee SK700 surprised us a little. And once we compared it beside the Redragon GS520, the differences became pretty easy to notice. Now the Redragon is still a solid budget gaming speaker. It gets loud, looks aggressive, and works well for FPS games. But the Nylavee feels more balanced overall, especially once you actually live with it every day. Let's get started. Right out of the box, the Nylavee keeps things simple. You get the speakers, a 3.5mm aux cable, a USB power cable with a USB-C adapter, and the manual. No software, no drivers. You just plug it in and start using it. And honestly, that simplicity fits this speaker well. The first thing we noticed was the size. These speakers are slim enough to slide beside monitors without taking over the desk. We placed them beside dual 27-inch monitors, and the included 4.5-foot cable made positioning really easy. Compared to the Redragon, the Nylavee also feels cleaner visually. The Redragon leans harder into the gamer aesthetic with brighter RGB and sharper styling. Meanwhile, the Nylavee looks more minimal with its matte finish and softer lighting. Now technically, the Nylavee runs a 2.0 stereo setup with around 8 to 10 watts of output through USB power. On paper, that number sounds pretty average. However, desktop speakers sit close to your ears, so tuning matters more than raw wattage. And honestly, this speaker is tuned surprisingly well for the price. The first thing we noticed was the mid-range. Vocals sound smooth and slightly forward without becoming harsh. Podcasts, YouTube videos, and dialogue-heavy games all sound natural and easy to listen to. At the same time, the treble stays controlled. A lot of cheap speakers boost upper frequencies too aggressively just to sound detailed. The Nylavee avoids that problem, so longer listening sessions feel much more comfortable. On the other hand, Redragon speaker sounds more energetic right away because the upper mids push harder. That makes footsteps and gunshots jump out more during FPS games. But once we switched over to music, the Nylavee started sounding fuller and smoother overall. Now the bass is probably the biggest surprise here. The Nylavee uses dual passive radiators, and they actually help more than expected. No, this is not deep subwoofer bass. You are still working with a compact USB-powered speaker. However, the low end carries enough warmth and body to make music feel richer. Kick drums have more weight. Movie effects sound fuller. And explosions during gaming feel more immersive without drowning everything else out. For example, in gaming, environmental sounds stayed nicely layered. Rain, dialogue, traffic noise, and soundtrack elements all remained separated instead of blending together into a muddy mess. The Redragon still performs well here, especially for gaming. In fact, its sharper tuning sometimes makes directional cues feel slightly more aggressive. However, the overall presentation feels more compact compared to the Nylavee. Meanwhile, the Nylavee creates a wider and more relaxed soundstage, which works better for longer sessions. Another thing we appreciated was the cleaner noise floor. The Nylavee has around a 70 decibel signal-to-noise ratio, and during quieter scenes, background hiss stayed fairly controlled. That makes podcasts, softer music, and late-night listening sound cleaner overall. And after several hours of use, the speaker still felt comfortable on the ears. That matters more than people think. Now visually, the RGB lighting is handled pretty well too. You get 9 lighting modes, including rainbow effects, breathing modes, and static colors. Thankfully, you can also turn the lighting off completely whenever you want a cleaner setup. Well, the Redragon felt slightly sharper once volume went higher. That does not make the Redragon speaker bad by any means. Actually, for competitive gaming and louder presentation, some people may even prefer that style. However, for mixed everyday use, the Nylavee simply feels more balanced. So after spending real time with both speakers, the conclusion became pretty simple. The Redragon GS520 feels tuned more for loud gaming energy. Meanwhile, the Nylavee SK700 feels tuned for actual everyday listening. Music sounds fuller, gaming still feels immersive. and longer listening sessions remain comfortable. So if your main goal is competitive gaming with sharper audio cues, the Redragon still makes sense. However, if you want a better all-around desktop speaker for gaming, movies, music, and daily use, then the Nylavee SK700 honestly feels like the more complete package. That was all. Thanks for watching. If you found it helpful, give it a like and subscribe for more videos. And don't forget to share your experience in the comments.